G'day, I'm Alister Christie and welcome to my CodeRage 7 presentation. A bit about me: I've been programming in Delphi since version 3, mostly developing real estate systems here in New Zealand. In 2006 I started making free video tutorials on Delphi, which brings me to LearnDelphi.tv, which is where you can find said videos. LearnDelphi.tv is the internet's premier site for video tutorials on Delphi, probably the only site. Over the last year I have also produced a number of commercial videos, making up about 20 hours of content, which you can of course purchase from LearnDelphi.tv. In this video we're going to take a look at XML Data Bindings. This follows along from one of my commercial videos, although there aren't any prerequisites for this video except some knowledge of both Delphi and XML. As you can see from the slide, the data binding mechanism provides an abstraction from TXML document, with the wizard creating a number of classes and interfaces, allowing you to manipulate the XML document via Delphi code, giving you access to code completion, type checking, and so on. That's enough of an introduction. Let's now get into some code. So to start off, I'm going to create a FireMonkey desktop application, and let's make it a little bit smaller so that it fits. Now we're doing XML in Delphi, and that's primarily done with the XML document, which we're going to be using but somewhat indirectly. Now this is actually part 2. My part 1 video we cover the XML document, or TXML document, in quite a lot of detail. You're not really going to need to have watched that video to understand what's going on. So that's one of my commercial videos. What we're going to do is I've got a couple of XML definition files, and I'll just delete that XDB file for now. We've got a DTT file and an XSD, and we can have a look at those. Here's the DTT, which describes an XML file, and this is a newspaper. It has a bunch of articles. It's a headline, byline, lead, body, and a bunch of attributes as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to generate a new XML data binding, and to do that we just go File, New, Other, and in our Delphi projects XML there's the XML data binding, and from that we specify our XML file, which is our DTT, and it generates, we now have a look at the data binding wizard, and we can change a bunch of things in here. So in particular we can have a look at the newspaper type, and it has a bunch of articles which repeat, so there's potentially more than one, and they're all articles, and they have as an author and editor and so on. Now we can change some of these properties. So if I made that Unicode string a DateTime instead, and we could say edition, I don't care about that, byline I'm not concerned with, lead I'm not concerned with, notes I'm not concerned with, and so on. So then we go next, and we see that it's generated for us a couple of interfaces, which we'll look at in a bit more detail shortly. And it's also, we can store our settings in a XDB file, which basically just describes basically what we selected. So we can come back, and if we need to regenerate the Pascal code, we can, based on this XDB file. So you'd probably want to put this file in source control along with your project. So this is the file that's created, and here are the two interfaces that we saw earlier, our newspaper type and article type, and so they have a bunch of getter and setter methods and a bunch of properties. And if we scroll down, we see we've got our implementation, so a concrete TXML article type or newspaper type, and it has an add method and returns. So if we can actually have a look at that add method, which just returns an item as an XML article type. So that's all very straightforward. As our getters and setters, and of course the properties are defined in the interface. Now there's also 3 global functions. And the first one, initially we're just going to concern ourselves with the new newspaper. So let's have a quick look at that before we get too carried away. And basically it returns a new XML document, which basically creates a new TXML document, makes it active, and sets its version. It then calls get.binding on that, which that's the interface. So there's no implementation there. So and here is its implementation. Does a bunch of stuff, and basically returns the root element, which will be the newspaper in our case for this example. So let's start making use of that. The first thing we'll need to do is use the example pass, and let's throw a button and a memo. So I'll just throw the button at the top there, stretch out our memo, and what I'll do, take advantage of the new anchors right and left, sorry, right and bottom, that are in the new FireMonkey with XE3. And let's just change the caption on that, which is of course called text in FireMonkey, just to confuse me. So in here we're going to create a new newspaper. Now it returns a XML newspaper type, and I could create a variable and what have you, but I am lazy, and sometimes lazy programs get more done. So Control-Shift-V to declare a variable. So we have a newspaper, and memo1.text is assigned XML, which is a string. And I try and run that, and we get an error. I think this is a bug in the data binding wizard. There's no. We need to add variants effectively, but that's not a problem. So we can now run that. Click on a newspaper, and we get our newspaper element, or root element. Now, sales of that newspaper aren't going to be very good because it has no articles, so we can fairly easily add an article, and we can do the same, just Control-Shift-V to create our article variable declaration. So we can now set the author, date is now, whoops, now, headline, and something along those lines. So we can run that, and we indeed get our newspaper with our article element, and it has an author attribute and a date attribute. And notice that this is day, month, year. I'm here in New Zealand, and that's our DateTime format. You probably wouldn't have wanted to declare this as a TDateTime type, and instead use a string, a Unicode string, and use a UTC formatted type DateTime. And of course our headline and body tags. So that is fairly straightforward, and we could of course add more articles. If we're a bit lazy and just do that. We've now got two identical articles. So there's one article finished, and there's a new. Anyway, so that's our first example. Now we're going to have a look at the XSD now, and have a look at some other bits and pieces. Our next file is example 2, and it's an XSD file, which is describes this one describes a bunch of shipments. So we're now going to do exactly the same thing. Let's create file, new, other, XML data binding, and we'll grab example 2. And we're going to do the same thing. I won't bother customizing this one, but it's basically a ship order type, and it has an order ID, an order person, and a shipment address, and then a bunch of items. And if we wanted multiple addresses, for instance, we could have the repeating, and so on. So, and we'll do that exactly the same thing, and we've got another XML data binding. So let's throw another button, shipment, and want to use the unit. And new ship order. Okay, so we can add an order ID, which is 42, dot order person, okay, ship to dot name, Alister, and I say I'm so famous that I need to specify what country I'm in at the moment. New Zealand, and then we want to add a bunch of items. So I'm going to be quite lazy. Go 4i equals 1 to 4. Do begin. Item dot add, and do the Control-Shift-V there. Dot title is assigned quantity equals 1. Something like that. Oh, we can make it NZD, $35. And we can do the exact same. Dot text is assigned XML. So I haven't really learned anything new there. Now this is all on one line, which is potentially a little bit frustrating. So item 1, quantity 1, price, and so on and so on. The window's not following the cursor. It might be the lack of scroll bars. So it would be nice if we split that out onto multiple lines. Now, what we can do is, rather than saying new shipment order, we can say get ship order and specify an XML document, or an IXML document, which XML document 1 happens to be. And on this, I can come down and say node AutoIndent and turn that to true. So if we have a look at the get shipment order, we'll see we pass in our doc, and it basically does this very similar to our new shipment order, except it does it based on the documents. We're not creating a new XML document, we're using a new one, an existing one. And when we run that and run it, we get much more tidy XML. So there's our order person, where we're shipping it to, the items, the order ID attribute, and so on and so forth, which is all very good. Now I'm actually just going to change this back to new ship order, and what I'm going to do is shipment dot now there's a bunch of methods on here, and document owner, which is the XML document, and we can have a look at the XML document at its options properties, and I'm just going to copy that plus do node AutoIndent, so we can actually get access to the XML document. And we get the same thing. Of course, we might not want to display the XML. We might want to save it to a file or a stream or something like that. Now, dot, and we go save, and there's nothing. But we can go to the owner document dot save to file XML. And we can run that, and if we have a look in temp, I can just double click on that and have a look at it in Internet Explorer eventually, and there we have it, have our XML file. So that was that's our second example. You might, however, not actually have a definition file for a you might not have like a DTT or XSD. You might just have the XML file. In which case, let's have a brief look at that. So we can just go File, New, Other, XML Data Binding. And we can actually go, C temp, and rather than saying sort of all the XML definition formats, we can actually just grab an XML file. And we can see that we've got our ship order type, it's an order ID, and it's automatically detected it as an integer, order person, ship to, and so on. Although you'll notice that there is somewhat less information. So we've only got country here, we haven't got the address or city or anything like that, because we didn't put those in the XML file. So Delphi is just recognized as much as it can. So that from that we can we could read in that order type. But let's have a look at a slightly more complicated example. So the example I thought we'd do a TradeMe example. TradeMe is in New Zealand's equivalent to eBay. They sort of had first mover advantage, and eBay hasn't really made much of a dent here in New Zealand. Basically, this is the TradeMe property, which I have quite a lot to do with. What I'm going to do is, this is the TradeMe API, and this is a method retrieve member listings, which we can grab it in XML or JSON. Of course, we're going to do XML, and it returns a whole bunch of stuff. There's the example XML file, but basically I'm just going to copy that, and we need the filter, which will be all.xml, and then we need a member ID, and I have one here. So we're just going to grab all the listings for a particular member. I have no idea who this is, but anyway, and that gives us an XML file. So I'm going to save that as all.xml and just replace it, and just make sure there's no, get rid of that XDB which I was playing with before. So we can now go back to Delphi and file new other, our XML data binding, and grab our all.xml, and I'm just going to accept all the default interpretations. Let's grab some integers and anyway, and it generates quite a substantial amount of code. So what are we looking at? 670 lines of code, which is quite a bit. But in fact, let's call that trade me listings, and of course we'll use that, and we'll add another button, and give it a new caption or text property. So if I use the unit, I've already used it. We now have load listings, so it's the third sort of global method we're going to look at, and specify our XML file, and of course we need to load that into something. And I suppose we could have a look at the let's go, it's all plus. No, why did that not work? I suppose I could just drag and drop it. Or I could open in Internet Explorer, and it has, you've got a bunch of things, a list, a listing, and a whole bunch of things. And let's grab the images out of the file. So dot lines dot clear 4i 0 to listings dot list, which is our Internet Explorer. Listings dot list, and it has a bunch of listings in it. So count -1, and we need a variable for that, so it's the Control-Shift-V. Add listings dot list listing I dot picture href, and run that, and there we have all the thumbnails for the various listings, the properties. Now there's a bit of digression. Let's make that memo a list box, and dot text dot and we can now click on the various things and throw an image control on there. On change, we need to download the image, so I need to HTTP get, and we need a URL dot items item index, and we'll throw that into a memory stream. Now, I should write this a lot nicer, but I'm being very lazy. Load from stream ms. And there we have it downloading the images. There's a little bit of a digression, but pretty cool anyway. So let's save all of that. Now, it strikes me as a little bit contrived to be using the same XML document that we used to create our data binding. So let's go back to a different. Let's copy that and put that in there, and we can get a different XML file. But let's copy that URL, and so we've got a one.get that URL. Now we could also, of course, parameterize that, and you know, have a little edit box or something like that to type in the member number and that kind of thing. But don't want to get too carried away. So rather than saying load listings, we will go get, and we'll specify our XML document 1. And before we get too carried away, .xml.text is assigned now XML str, and we should get, fingers crossed, a different set of images. In fact, there are more of them by the look of it, and that works just the same. Downloading the thumbnails. So we should probably have a bit more of a play around with our XML document and see what we can do. XML is a tree structure, so what we might do is throw a tree view on and have a list of listings and display. We'll start off with just displaying the listing ID. So let's throw a tree view on there. And I'll be really lazy, and let's just turn that visibility off for now, and put that on, and anchors. Okay, now what I'll do, we'll stick with the TradeMe stuff, so I'll just refactor this out. So let's pull that out, refactor extract method. That's odd. Let's try that again. I'll just copy that. Oh, actually, before I do that, I will need to shift this up into here. Just copy that, and we'll put a new button on. TradeMe do, and I can do the Control Shift V to get our declare our variable. So we now need to fill our tree view, and so let's do that now. So basically, we want to iterate over each of our listings. So listings.list. So for I is assigned 0 to dot listings dot list dot count -1. So for each listing in our list, do listing gets listings I. If I could type it all right, and we need to declare our variable. So now we want to add our listing ID to the tree view, which is just the listing ID. So what I'm going to do is, rather than just create a T tree view item, I'm going to create a custom one. So XML listing type. So we're going to be wanting to create one of those. So let's scroll back down. And I'll call it item. And it's the standard Control-Shift-V to declare it. Item.listing gets listing item.text gets dot listing ID item.parent is assigned tree view 1. So we can run that now. And we have our list of listing IDs. So we probably now want to add some children to that, so that we've got a bit more of a tree structure. And to do that, I'm going to start by writing a little support routine. Add tree item. So we're going to basically set all these properties so we can do it all in one line. So a parent is a tfmx object. Text a string and is a one of those. And we want to return one of those. I think I'll do it in the clipboard. Create self. Okay. Result dot text is assigned text dot listing assigned listing, and result dot parent assign parent. So we can now simplify this somewhat. Oh, in fact, item is assigned. And our parent is the tree view. Our text is our listing ID. And listing. get rid of that. So we can now add tree item. Our parent is now going to be item. Semicolon on the end there. Our text, we'll go title and listing, and we'll also add start date. So we will now run that. And we've got our tree, but we notice that this date format is not particularly human readable. We can pretty much work it out, but we want to convert that perhaps into the local DateTime format. Now, if I use the unit's XS built-ins, BU built-ins, not bulletins, and come back down, there is a XML time to DateTime, and we need our XML DateTime string, which is that, and there's also a parameter for dealing with UTC. I don't know if it's in UTC relative to UTC, so I won't worry. So that returns a date time, so we want to convert that back to a string. So date time to str. So when you're dealing with XML files and dates, you're probably going to come across that date format quite frequently. So it's quite helpful to know how to convert that. That's a bit of a long line of code, but I'd probably normally split that out. And we now have a much more ordinary DateTime. Now, we probably want to also retrieve the picture when we click on an item. So we can do that, and we're already doing that in here. Oh, and it's an earthquake. Very interesting. Still shaking a bit. Okay, I'll carry on. So I'll refactor this out, and just, actually no, I don't want to refactor that bit. We want all of that, but I want a URL parameter. Sort of doing a bit of I might call it prefactoring before refactoring. So okay, and we can now extract that. Get thumbnail or get image, get picture. Probably ordinarily have a much better name for that. But anyhow, and we can have a look on the on-tree view change. On change, and this is, you'll see why I put the we've got this custom tree view type, listing tree view, rather than just using the tree view item. So we're going to use get picture on something. So if gv1.selected equal to nil, then let's have a look. Best way to do this, tree dot as t listings tree item dot listing need to declare that, of course. Oh, and I can also check if the URL is not blank. And picture href. Oops, getting a bit ahead of myself. Dot picture href, and I think that will work. Okay, and it gets the pictures. So we're grabbing the from the tree view item, we're grabbing the listing and then grabbing the URL and then downloading it. So fairly straightforward. What we might also want to do is, if we have a look in here, we'll see that there's geographic location. So latitude and longitude. Now we could display a map with those coordinates, which we can just open in a browser. Fairly straightforward. So let's do that next. So let's throw another button on there, and oops, and call that map. And in it, we're going to want to do basically that initially. I should probably do some sort of refactoring to encapsulate that a function, but I'll be lazy for now. And we're going to need a URL to open it up on Google Maps. And the URL is going to look something like this. %s, %s, and we want to throw the latitude and longitude in there. Now I can go listing dot geographic location dot for both of those, but what I'll do is go geo is assigned geographic location, and we'll need a variable for that. Latitude and geo dot longitude. And now we want to open that URL, and I couldn't find a platform agnostic way of doing that, so I'll revert to being my lazy self and throw shell API in there. Now we're pretty much specific to Windows. And speaking of that, before we get too carried away, currently this is the DOM vendor CMS XML. You probably want to change that to a DOM, which is obviously the MS part is not going to work on a Mac. So now we want to go shell execute. Handle, I don't know what it is on a FireMonkey application, but we want to open, and so I'll make that look pretty. Feature and probably should include the Windows unit, but I think 1 is default, show default. So if we run that now, and pick a listing, we can bring up the map, probably. But yeah, so that's pretty basic. So just before we finish up, let's bring up our trade me code again. And so our listing, which is a IXML listing type, and we can see that it's actually an IXML node, and we've got also this IXML node collection. Now, I cover these two to death in my XML and Delphi Part 1 video, which is one of my commercial videos, which is basically all about the TXML document. Now, what it means that this is a IXML node is that we can use all the sort of functions and features such as the child values property and access title in this form. And in fact, because this is a default sort of array indexer, we can actually do that, which is much more concise, and we get the exact same result. Now, it's much nicer to be able to say dot title, because we get the little code insight and what have you. But it might be the case that there are certain nodes that you didn't bind for a particular reason, or that the structure of your XML is such that there's some stuff which is always present, and there's a whole bunch of random stuff in there as well, which you might want to be able to access, but it's not possible to create a data binding for. So you can use all the properties of the IXML node, and of course our list is a collection. Rather than saying dot listing, we can say dot child nodes I, and of course we need to typecast that to our IXML listing type, and of course that will work as well. So that's kind of what it means. So basically these structures are just an overlay over the IXML document or TXML document. So you can still access the sort of lower level, go down a level and access the sort of internal structure in a bit more detail. But that's list. What did I have there previously? Listing I. So that's pretty much all I wanted to say for this video. So we will stop here. Thanks for taking the time to watch my video. I hope you found it instructive. I'm Alister Christie.
How do I define my own DTD elements, alpha S?
So if you want to write your own DTD, you can basically just Google it and create one in a text editor. I think there are a few tools that allow you to do it a bit more automatically, such as I think Liquid XML. I think it's an application you can it's a free version of that, which allows you to create XML definition files. If that was the question.
Yep. What XML data? Oh, this is what is XML data binding used for? What are the situations make me really want it to need it? I guess if you got some XML data, right? Ahmed is asking.
Yeah, so you can use the TXML document just purely by itself, but you miss out. There's no sort of code insight, so you don't get all the code completion and sort of refactoring capabilities and stuff like that you would with having a data binding.
And then there's XML Mapper, I think, which allows you to map to fields. Is that right? It's been a long time since I looked at it.
Yes. So that would I've on my to-do list is XML and Delphi Part 3, which will I'd be wanting to cover the SAX, the Simple API for XML, and XPath, and the XML data providers, which allow you to connect a client dataset to an arbitrary XML file, and you use the XML mapper to map fields sort of the elements in the XML document to fields in the client dataset.
Yep. Yeah, it's been a while because I was thinking about that and wanting to do something with the live binding designer. And once I knew I could do the mappings from XML to the client dataset fields, then I knew I could use visual live bindings to start connecting things up that way, separate from doing all the stuff that you did in code.
Yeah, I found the XML mapper a bit awkward to use, but it is quite powerful, and that gives you the whole the power of using the client dataset, which is a pretty awesome component, which so Kerry Jensen's talk earlier.
Yep. And Ralph was mentioning about recommending using XSL XSD rather than DTD, much more greater data manipulation and flexibility.
Yes, I don't think DTDs are XML themselves, whereas the XSL and what have you are all XML files, so you can actually manipulate them using XML tools.
And then Ahmed has this question here about, can he grab parts of a web page that contain something like, a paragraph image and use those in XML FMX form? You can always save things locally. I'm not sure about mapping the underlying things in a web page that, image sources or whatever, or if there's some data definition underneath that's being used by some JavaScript or something and mapping it to FireMonkey form. Any thoughts there about the web page? You were out, but you were grabbing, data definitions and so on.
Yes. I guess if the document, the web document, is in XHTML, you could potentially use an XML document, TXML document to manipulate it. But I think there's some extra stuff in there in XHTML which might make that awkward. I'm not sure off the top of my head. I've never actually tried it.
Yeah. No, I've done things with Project Indie components for spidering and parsing, the HTML.
Indeed.
Trying to pull stuff out, but then you're just almost like screen scraping at that point.
Yes, I've done a bit of that myself, which is quite awkward. I've mostly in Delphi 2007, unfortunately. In a later version of Delphi, I'll be using the regular expression engine a bit more. That's now available.
So again, it's been a while for me on XML and XML document. I think you can specify different parsers. There's an MS XML. Yes. It's John here, and he's wondering about FireMonkey, multi-platform, Macintosh versus Windows.
Okay, so I haven't actually tested it because I don't have a Mac, but by default, the TXML document uses the Microsoft parser, but you can specify, there's another one, ADOM, which I think is pure sort of Pascal, effectively, so that is cross-platform, I think. And if you go back further, older versions of Delphi 7, I think there was a Xerxes and some other one as well that was available. Which,
yeah,